So I'm gonna start things off and welcome everybody. Thank you all for joining us for the first of our 6-week series of WITS talks. 3 panels over the course of 6 weeks, so check out the rest of them. And first, I just wanted to sort of highlight and bring to everyone's attention Wellness in the Schools, the organization that we're supporting tonight with ticket sales. WITS is a national nonprofit that teaches kids healthy habits to live and learn better. They were founded with the big, bold mission to end childhood obesity. And I've been lucky to know the WITS team for many years. They were founded in 2005, and it's been amazing to see their growth just as a point of scale. WITS reaches 95,000 kids in more than 190 schools across 4 states and Washington, D.C. And as far as their programming, I think this is really amazing. Kids in WITS schools eat 40% more fruits and vegetables than kids in non-WITS schools. Their schools offer and serve 76% more whole food entrees than non-WITS schools. So if you haven't had a chance to ever check out the organization, please visit wellnessintheschools.org. Amazing group and amazing team. So I'm glad they were here for us to support and to have this conversation. So a couple of things, just sort of ground rules as we get into the panel. We are going to start off with just a 45-minute conversation with us, with this amazing group of panelists, and then we will turn it over to 15 minutes of audience questions. So down in your bottom right-hand corner, there should be a Q&A little icon. If you have any questions as an attendee or an audience member, I know we can't see you, but if you have any questions, you can, throughout the conversation, just be submitting Q&A. And at the end, I will get them all and we'll have 15 minutes of your questions. So to start things off, I'm going to have each one of our panelists, this amazing group, introduce yourselves, just because you each really have such interesting backgrounds and long enough stories that I'm not going to do you justice. But I'm so happy to have Amy, Pierre, and Michel with us. And I'd love for you guys to just give us your background, sort of your commitments and careers in food, and what you've been working on this past year throughout the face of the pandemic. Maybe we'll have Pierre kick us off.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. Absolutely excited to join you. My name is Pierre Thiam. I'm a chef from Senegal, and I've been operating in New York for close to 3 decades now in the restaurant world. I studied as a physics and chemistry student. I never thought of becoming a chef. This was completely an accident of itinerary, really, because I'm coming from a culture where food is a woman activity. So I grew up not even dreaming of becoming a chef, but I'm have no regrets right now. I arrived in New York City in the late 80s, started working in restaurants from the bottom up, really. And I found myself in a position in the mid 90s where I started wondering where was the African food. You know, it was missing in the scene. You know, in the food capital of the world, I couldn't see any African food, and I took it as a mission for me to start introducing those flavors. And this is gradually how I gradually started a catering company, opened my first restaurant in 2000 in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, pioneering. No one was having a restaurant in that particular area. And it was quite well received, survived 4 years, which is a long time in the industry, opened a second restaurant still in Brooklyn, and gradually started, wrote my first cookbook in the same mission, introducing those flavors. And as I wrote the book, I realized that there was also a need for access to the ingredients because the ingredients weren't accessible. And that's how I started thinking about figuring out a way to bring those ingredients and bring them to market. And basically, that's how I started my company, Yolele, which I will talk about today. Yolele is an African food company that distributes products, underutilized products from Africa. We source it with small farmers in the West African region, and with the goal to bring opportunities, economic opportunities, to also select ingredients that are great for the environment, that are drought resistant, that are regenerative agriculture. And today we are distributed across the country. And my restaurant, Teranga, is also, we opened 2 restaurants. Actually, the second one opened in the pandemic. We are in New York City. We are a fast casual African restaurant. So that's pretty much about it for me. I'm a cookbook author as well.
Great. Amy, let's go to you.
Wow, that's impressive. So I also became a chef kind of by accident, just working, um, just needing a job. I left school really young and I wanted to just move to Europe. I'm Australian, sorry, forgot that part in case you can't tell. I've been in New York for over 20 years, and I've been out of Australia for more than half my life. So I love the idea of working with food because it gave me freedom to travel and just be creative. So I left Australia really young and moved to Amsterdam and started working as a waitress in a Japanese macrobiotic restaurant. And that's where I really sort of found my path to cooking with whole foods and food as medicine in a way. I'd grown up on a vegetarian whole food diet, living in really a very remote area of Australia. So we had to grow everything that we wanted to eat on a daily basis and order everything else bulk. My mother's an amazing cook and my father made bread and we all cooked everything. There was no other option. So I came from that background and I was just dying to get to like New York or Paris or Sydney or just anywhere like a city. And so then I started working in restaurants. But Amsterdam was the first proper restaurant that I worked, and I was actually thrown in the deep end. Even though I was waitressing there, they were like, "Oh, maybe you'd like to make the desserts," and I was like, "Yes," and I did, and everything fell apart, and it was a total failure the first time. But after that, I slowly sort of grew a following and got really excited about it, and worked there for a few years actually. Then moved to London to start a catering business with a friend from Australia, with the idea of opening a restaurant. Actually, that was sort of my dream back then. And we never opened a restaurant. Catering was really successful, so we kept catering. And then I moved to New York in '99 and worked at Angelica Kitchen, which is, you know, one of the first farm to table restaurants. And I was executive chef there, and I worked there for 7 years or 8 years. And then I started private cooking because it was really exciting to me that I had all these other options in America that I felt I didn't have in other parts of the world, just like food styling and, you know, private cooking and teaching. And I don't know, I just sort of started exploring a lot of different, you know, areas, and started a food blog in 2009. And then, you know, always taken photos of my own food. I'm really not a good photographer. I always use photographers for my cookbooks, but I wrote my first book. It was released in 2014, and then it won a James Beard Award the next year. And that was like very exciting for me. I felt like the kind of food that I did was getting noticed, and now it's totally mainstream, but it was really more rare 20 years ago, that's for sure. And then I wrote another book and I got another James Beard Award. So that was pretty exciting. And then I was set to open a restaurant, and we opened for 2 nights in March last year. And then the whole city shut down. So I had the experience of setting it all up, but now we're all kind of changing direction. And I feel I'm still looking for exactly what that is, but I'm interested in doing products and you know, reaching more people and being able to teach classes. I love teaching and interacting with people, and that's always been a part of what I've done over the years. So I've got to work out how you do that virtually.
Excellent. All right, Michel, you're up.
Hi, I'm Michel Nischan. Been a chef for over 35 years. Also, the co-founder and executive chairman of a nonprofit called Wholesome Wave that directly addresses nutrition insecurity by raising private money to put the purchasing power in the hands of low-income Americans struggling with food, nutrition insecurity, racial, ethnic, age, and income disparities, so that they can choose and purchase the fruits and vegetables they need to be healthy and avoid the diet-related diseases that drove the highest death and hospitalization rates from COVID. But I started as the grandson of a Morley, Missouri dirt farmer. Both my parents were farmers who got forced out of farming by the policy changes that happened after World War II that disfavored smallholder farming in the United States. But was lucky enough to work 6 weeks every summer on my grandfather's farm in Morley, Missouri, in the little boot heel, where I learned how to butcher and cure and can and ferment and pickle, which I thought was just a normal part of everyday life until my mom and dad fell on hard times when I was in high school. we had to move out. I was 17 years old and get an apartment with my older brother. My mom said, "You're in luck, Michel. You can cook, get a job in a restaurant. At least you'll eat. You'll get a paycheck and a meal a day." And the rest is history. Along the way, I've been lucky enough to win a couple of Beard Awards. 25 years ago, my firstborn son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, so I made the connection to food and human health. Changed the way we cooked at home for our family, which led to a real tension, because even though I was doing local, organic, and sustainable before farm to table was even strung together in a sentence, I felt I was feeding my customers things I wouldn't feed my family. So I partnered with Drew Nieporn in 1997, opened a restaurant called Heartbeat in the First W Hotel, a restaurant of well-being, local, organic, sustainable, but no cream, no butter, no flour, no sugar. And no processed food of any kind. We got 3 stars in the New York Times and 0 stars in the New York Post, and accused of being the food police. So we were controversial and busy, which was great. But that tension led to the founding of Wholesome Wave and the need to constantly raise money in a nonprofit, especially our model, where it's difficult to find someone to fund us because we're not direct service. We partner and surrogate through over 1,400 community-based organizations in the country and teach them how to do our style of programs and then provide them the money to do it. My last restaurant project was with the late actor Paul Newman, so I'm intimately familiar with the Newman's own business model. So I created a for-profit plant-based soup company for large-scale food service called Wholesome Crave, where 5% of gross revenues from Wholesome Crave benefit the work of Wholesome Wave. So I can stop asking people for money. And right when we were getting ready to kind of scale, after a really solid year of traction, COVID hit. So we did pivot to e-commerce. So we're available at wholesomecrave.com. You can check our stuff out. The pivot really caused us to really rethink the way we do our business modeling in many ways, but also to understand that as a result of what we've seen with COVID, and I think the good news for all of us is that there's a broader awareness in the general public and amongst businesses that diet-related diseases are real. They're not just somebody else's problem. The power of food is something that can have a huge environmental and human health impact. And I think we all have an opportunity to participate in that now in ways that we never were before. So looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's such a nice segue. And I just love hearing all of your stories that some of which I know and some I just learned. But I think this is going to just be so interesting to hear from all of you, given what's happened this year. And to start things off, I just wanted to give a quick anecdote or sort of a story as to how this particular conversation came about. Last year around this time, April, May 2020, I was getting a lot of phone calls from chefs. And by way of background, I've been in the more of the grocery industry and on the consumer product goods or the CPG side of the business, which you'll hear that a lot tonight, CPG. So that's what that means, consumer goods. Historically, a lot of chefs have sort of stayed away from CPG. It feels a little commercial, or maybe it's, I think in many ways, a lot of chefs have sort of been like, I'm above that. And I'm a James Beard Award winning chef. I'm not like scaling products for grocery, but of course, COVID hits last year, and I'm getting phone calls from chefs that I sort of never would believe are considering this. And of course, Amy is one of these people, and she called me. I think decided this might have been May last year. And the conversation struck me and has stuck with me because as we started talking through some product ideas that Amy has, which you may or may not share, but I think the takeaway is they're highly inventive, and they really came with this culinary perspective and this culinary creativity that very often when in my work, when I'm talking to new brands and sort of new, more industrial food product developers, a very different conversation. So normally those conversations are driven by shelf stability, food safety, cost, you're built for utility and scale. And I felt like Amy was talking and sort of leading with flavor, taste, nutrition, balance, and function. And she was, you didn't even know you were thinking this, but like I was taking all of this away from the conversation. So on the one hand, it's been such a terrible and challenging year for the hospitality industry, but I sort of struck me that there could be this silver lining or a little bit of a positive outcome for these wonderful, amazing chefs bringing their culinary creativity to CPG, to products at scale, and hopefully that having some positive outcome on sort of America's health. So that conversation is really what led to this conversation tonight. And so I guess I'll just kick it off with the question of, how the pandemic has forced you all to think differently about your role in the food industry, and particularly the two of you who have already been launching products, just what it's forced you to rethink as you build those businesses. So maybe we'll start with Michel.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, thanks for that. I think, interestingly, I felt that when we actually developed the Wholesome Crave product, right place in the right time, focusing on scaled food service, because there's a huge unmet demand gap for soup, because it's in a smaller restaurant, if you're serving 100 to 400 people a night, soup's a great opportunity to make money by reutilizing your waste. But if you're feeding 50,000 people a couple of meals a day, it's a very expensive proposition to move food scraps around multiple campuses, get them to a central facility so they can be prepared into a delicious soup and then shipped back out. It's labor intensive, it's facilities intensive. So we thought we were in a good place, and then really learned about the vulnerability of the sector in a pandemic environment. And what was interesting to us is our first reaction was, oh my gosh, are we going to survive this? Our second reaction was in really observing how on fire e-commerce became, how rapidly it just exploded, with a new class of customer that surprised us. Folks that eat out in restaurants and take most of their meals every week in restaurants, who really don't cook much at home, started making their own sourdough bread. They picked like the hardest thing to do and decided to do that at home. But what was interesting to me, and I think we've seen it in all the post surveys, a lot of these folks who fell in love with cooking at home, they ran out of recipes quick. They're desperate for ideas, but they actually like cooking at home, and they plan to continue to do it. So I think we have this new class of educated consumer at home, that really demonstrate a lot of promise. And many of them, because of the health conditions that were highlighted during the pandemic, are really interested in healthier heirloom foods, culturally appropriate foods that really speak to and can support the type of human health that can help us be resilient in a future environment. So, our pivot was just to rapidly become a two-channel business. And I think the other thing that what we're seeing, I think we're just lucky, where the universe is providing for us, that we're at the right place at the right time. There are pretty significant facilities changes that are being made in the scaled food service sector that actually favor products like ours. Because the selection, the variety that these food service providers, the endless buffets of endless subjects, are really going to condense down into what are single subject meal solutions that are wholesome, largely plant-based, delicious, can play well at ambient temperatures, et cetera. So we're very hopeful that we're actually in a good spot, but scary.
That's great. And Amy, your perspective, I think, is going to be so different in just entering this world or starting to think about it.
Yeah. I've actually always wanted to do something, and I could never figure out exactly what it was. And I guess working for years as a personal chef, which would also, the pandemic would have halted that as well. It was just how to help people eat well, feel good, and make it easier for them. Because, having one person cook for you or eating out in restaurants all the time, you're really not used to the amount of labor that it takes. And it really does. And it's not just cooking and cleaning up. It's sourcing good ingredients and making sure they're responsible and they're the healthiest they can be. And, who grew them and where did they come from and all of that. I mean, it's so much thought involved, and footwork, or now handwork, researching where you get all that from. So I feel like a product that I've been thinking about has been something that I want it to be easy, like adding water to some kind of breakfast or, you know, broth idea or something. And it really still has to taste really good. And I feel like, you know, I need some innovation in how that could actually happen. But it really is about making it accessible for people to, you know, to eat really well. And I would actually buy, and a lot of people I know that actually do cook and, you know, make everything from scratch would still like it too, because there's nothing strange or odd in it. Because, you know, usually that's why I don't buy anything that's pre-made, just because there's always one ingredient or something odd in there. But I'm like, don't want to eat that. So, you know, it comes from a fussy place, but I think it really does. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, I thought it was interesting. You shared with me the difference between your first cookbook and your second, and just in having a child in between then, and how differently you think about some of this preparation. And is that something you're thinking about in terms of also making this that easy for people?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about one of your questions today, and I was thinking, you know, we really start forming our taste for food early. And you know, mine was informed by things we grew in the garden and really like homemade breads and everything else. I mean, maybe we bought noodles or pasta, but, you know, everything was made from scratch. And I feel like I'm really mindful of my son, because I see him see a baguette, you know, and there's nothing wrong with these foods, but I don't want him eating white bread every day. You know, I just don't want that. And I can see how it happens. It's just so easy. It's like, and they just want this kind of junky stuff. And so, you know, I really think that you got to start early. And I'm run off my feet, and I'm a cook. I mean, I'm a cook, and I am running around like for this little person, trying to just like make him eat well. And it's like, wow, you really need help. And, you know, what's packaged is usually not great. So, yeah. That's my story.
Pierre, I think would love to hear from you, in having now many years been building your CPG business, just sort of both lessons learned and also how this year has gone.
Well, so yeah, we started in 2017, really studying, bringing our products to market. So the idea, like I said, it came organically. I just was writing cookbooks, and every time I was writing cookbooks, they were like, I had to find few pages at the end to help the readers to have access to the product, to source those products. So it was, to me, it was an opportunity. It's like I should figure out a way to bring those products to the consumers. And this is when I was writing my Senegal cookbook, that I was traveling and meeting producers around the country. I wanted that cookbook to be about the producers. I wanted the readers to understand where those products were coming from, who were those producers, you know, tell their stories. So I would interview them, and each of the producers would tell the stories about their products and their challenges. So one of the products that really struck me was this really tiny grain that was in the south of Senegal, in an area where really nothing really grows. It's a region of Africa called the Sahel region, south of the Sahara. It's dry and arid. And when you arrive there, they serve you this grain called fonio. It's like the grain that they offer to their guests of honors. You know, it's like they want to honor you, they serve you fonio. And it's been around, it turns out, for 5,000 years. And it's not popular because it's a grain that's difficult to process, but it's very nutritious. It grows in poor soil. You know, it has deep roots that restores the soil. So I have all those things. And in addition, it cooks in 5 minutes. So I was like, this grain can be a world-class grain. You know, I have to figure out a way to bring it to the market. And this is how I thought of starting Yolele. So me and my partner, Philippe Tevro, we just got together and we figured out a way to just do it, you know, bring your fonio to the market very naively. Never even thought this, you know, it was impossible. I was like, I can do it. You know, this is going to be great for the environment, because this grain, the agriculture regenerates the soil. Is going to be great for these farmers because they have no opportunities. They have no access to market at all. And this is going to be great for the consumers because they'll have diversity in their choices. So that's how it went for me. And we started with one supermarket, one Whole Food opened by my restaurant in Harlem, Teranga. And we offered the product, and Whole Foods took us. And the product did well. It did great, actually. It was a champion in its category. You know, we would go and do food tastings there and stuff. And every time we would do food tastings, people would the shelves would be empty. Everyone would buy the fonio. So gradually, we were in all the Whole Foods in New York City and then in the Northeastern region. And then the pandemic hit, so then we had to, I mean, it was a terrible situation for the restaurant in particular, because we had to figure out, are we going to close the restaurant? We decided not to stay open and to reconfigure our setup. But for Yolele, the food company, it was a great opportunity. We saw it as a way to expand and to go bold. So we distributed nationally. All the Whole Foods in the US were distributing our fonio, and we distributed not only the Whole Food, but close to 1,500 natural supermarkets now are distributing our fonio. We decided to even add more products during the pandemic, and we added a line of pilafs. Like, we have 5 pilafs, all inspired by West African cuisine. So it was still mission aligned. And the ingredients that we would use in our pilafs were all ingredients that were not only nutritious, but great for the planet, like moringa, like baobab, exotic ingredients. So just sourcing it and making sure we were really giving back to those regions that were among the poorest in the world, the regions where our products are coming from, the region of my origins, really. And today we launched 5 new pilafs. We just launched chips, fonio chips. So we're entering the snack category, which is very exciting. It's a fast-moving category. We have 4 flavors of chips, and we launched fonio flour as well. So it's been exciting. We really think this crisis opened up opportunities. That Churchill, who said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." So this is really what we saw in it. So, and we're looking forward to keep on growing. We have a vision of building a processing facility at the source to remove the bottleneck of just like, because that's really slowing down everything, to get the standard of processing and to really allow the farmers to expand their production as well. And all of it is being done in a way that's organic. We can trace those products, and it's in a healthy way as well. So yeah, that's the story for now.
Yeah, no, and it's so interesting, and it's really interesting to think about the opportunities that sort of presented themselves this year, whereas, for many, it could have gone in the other direction. But I think, to that point, or to the theme of, I think each one of you thinking a lot about how you can bring and make healthy foods more accessible or affordable or approachable for people. One thing that I think we all often think about, and you sort of mentioned it, Amy, is just there's just junk food everywhere, right? That's probably, it's one of the hardest things in terms of sort of getting your health on track in America. And so I think a lot about ultra processed foods, another sort of term for junk foods. And I shared a report with this team that we can put in the chat later, that I'd found from the FAO, from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN. And I think it's so interesting because it defines minimally processed, processed, and ultra processed foods in this report. And the designation for ultra processed foods, it goes something like this: ingredients of rare or no culinary use. So almost by design and by definition, ultra processed foods are ingredients that are literally unrecognizable in a kitchen. They're like divorced from culinary input. And I read that, and I really thought that was just such an interesting line between what we consider really heavily processed, industrialized junk foods, and even lightly processed, but foods that really do more for our health. And so I thought it was very relevant to this conversation. And I just wondered, how you all respond to that, and what you think about in terms of some of these big health problems as chefs, and maybe the role you can play. I'd love to hear from you, Michel, because this has been a lot of your, life's work.
Right. Well, so, what's interesting to me is just how immediately the world, both on the supply chain side and the consumer side, lean heavily into process anything when it comes to issues around food and health, right? When veganism and vegetarianism really exploded, you had tofu, tofurkey, seitan, all kinds of highly processed animal protein replacements that people could consume, solely for the purpose of not consuming an animal product. And nature actually gives us everything we need to have all the complete proteins, the vitamins, minerals, nutrients, phytochemicals, and nutrients that we need to lead a really healthy life without having to process any of it. There is, to the point, to Elly's point of the FAO definitions, anything is, if you don't just pull it out of the ground and eat it raw, it's processed. The minute you clean something or you massage kale or you slice and saute something, you're processing the food. But I've always believed in the school that Michael Pollan picked up on when he started telling people in his books, if you can't read or understand or pronounce the ingredient, don't eat it, let alone pay for it. So I've always focused on that in all of my work. When we did Heartbeat Restaurant in New York City, and then Pure Restaurant with Taj Hotels in Mumbai, India, about half of the menu in Heartbeat was vegetarian, and 2/3 of that was vegan. In Mumbai, 80% of the menu was vegetarian, and about 80% of that was completely plant-based. We didn't put any V's or GFs or anything on the menu. We just had a nice narrative description of what the dishes were. And nobody ever had a complaint or felt that they were lacking. It's really an understanding of how do you deploy the right combination of grass family seeds and grains with legumes to get the complete chain of amino acids that you need to constitute that complete protein. And then when you look at just the wild variety of, I've got seed packets here in front of me because we've been planting the garden all day. This year, we're going to probably plant 12 varieties of beans just in our garden. And they're, close to 1,000 varieties of seed pod beans that are available. So I do believe if there's a small silver lining to this pandemic for the general public at large, it's this understanding that in the power of plants, the power of food, that eating meat's not a bad thing. Eating less of it is a very good idea. And if you eat more plants and less meat, you can afford the more expensive grass-fed, grass-finished meat, which is actually additive to the environment instead of depletive to the environment. There are too many options out there to rely so heavily on things that are so processed beyond the simple notion of convenience, which is the biggest barrier that I think we all face in trying to get people to return to, more natural and whole foods diet.
Yeah. Amy, I'm curious your thoughts on this, and just in terms of even you, like growing up living off the land, which is very both amazing, I think, for a lot of us growing up here, and really has influenced the way you cook. But you also had to make some adjustments as a working person, as a mom, and in thinking, it sounds like in thinking through your product lines, like you're really considering that. So what are some of maybe the trade-offs, or how do you think about this and in bringing the two together, health and convenience?
Yeah, it's been, I think over the last year, it's evolved a lot. And I've been thinking also about how you involve children in that. And rather than having them eat separate things, like how can you eat all together? And, like breakfast, and what does that mean? And I guess I've just been exploring that. But yeah, I think, yeah, convenience. It's hard. Everyone's sick of cooking now. Me included at times, and I just want things to be easy, but I'm also really happy with simple food. Like I will eat a plain bowl of brown rice. It's actually my favorite meal. A little bit of tamari, maybe a scallion on there with some toasted seeds, but like I actually love monk food. So and I know cooking for people, they don't want to eat that every day. I get it. But, you just change up the dressing, or I think that's another thing, is like all these condiments and sprinkles that people are coming up with. And I think there's a lot in the pipeline at the moment. And I just got some new dukkha that's like all different flavored ones, like sweetish ones with coconut and like rose, unusual, things that you can just make simple food taste, like you've spent longer than you have on it, maybe. I think all those things are great because they don't need to have some, you know, thickening agents like these sauces and dressings often do. And how do you make a good dressing keep well? And the best dressings to me are just like 3 ingredients anyway. So I go back and forward with, you know, how I think you've got to teach people to cook. I mean, really, that's what you want, isn't it? I mean, that was always the goal at Angelica Kitchen, was actually, we want you to cook at home. So, you know, the owner was very into having, you know, giving cooking classes and helping people eat at home. I mean, it is the ideal. But, you know, and then you can get introduced to these delicious grains like Pierre's brought in. And I think, wow, I mean, there's just like a whole world that you can bring into your kitchen. If it is 5 minutes, you really have no excuse not to eat a whole grain. But it is hard, you know, it's messy. That's the thing. It's the cleaning up, it's the prepping. I mean, vegetables are a hell of a lot of work. Like, especially if you leave the peels on and you're scrubbing carrots and you're washing greens, and, you know, it is a lot. So you have to be organized. So how do you help people be organized? I guess that's a good question.
Pierre, how do you think about all of this, and how does that inform some of maybe even the product development at Ulele?
Oh, we've been thinking in that same way, you know, like food is medicine, like Amy said, you know, we just, for me, like I said, again, I'm trying to find inspiration in the food of my origins. And when I look at that food, it's very simple, you know, it's very simple. It's great ingredients, you know, what ingredients that today are qualified as superfoods. When you look at baobab and dawa dawa, you know, she's like this amazing fermented locust bean that's widespread across West Africa. That's what we've been using traditionally until colonization hit, and we saw a shift like into the way we were feeding ourselves. And with that shift, of course, came some diseases. So I've witnessed that. I mean, I've seen some imported diseases, some food that I used to see growing up in Senegal that have disappeared. And I was into this role as a chef. I thought I could be the one who bring these ingredients back by just sourcing them, you know, and that's how I did with fonio, and I'm doing it with baobab leaves. For instance, baobab leaves is an amazing ingredient that we people never think about. We only think of baobab fruits when we're even aware of what baobab is. You know, this ingredient that's really rich in vitamin C, extremely rich in vitamin C. You know, things like, you know, red palm oil, you know, if it's sourced properly, it's amazing. It's really great for you. It has an amazing amount of beta carotene. You know, fonio itself, you know, we're talking about amino acids. Fonio has like 2 amino acids that are deficient in most grains, and it has it in abundance. That's cysteine and methionine. So our food is medicine, you know, and I've known that, you know, I grew up in that area. I grew up with my grandmother. Whenever I'm sick, she has a food for it. You know, it's not like she goes to the pharmacy. She knows that there's a certain type of food that would heal me. So I grew up in that mindset, and this is what I'm trying to bring, you know, with Ulele, by bringing those ingredients, opening markets for them, is just a way to even save the biodiversity, because those ingredients disappear. You know, many of them, when we don't use them, they disappear, and we stuck with this global diet that big agri has imposed upon us, and we stuck with eating, you know, the same 4 grains year round, you know, which is terrible when we neglecting amazing crops, you know, amazing crops. Fonio is just one of them, but there's so many crops that are out there, thousands of them, that we are ignoring, and they're disappearing. And those crops are not only great for us, but they're great for the planet. You know, they drought resistant, which is something that's very important. I repeat that because water is a rare commodity, and it's going to be even more of an issue as we move forward. You know, when we're going to be 10 billion people on this planet, how are we going to feed them? We need to think about that. We need to think about the kind of food system we'll have into place that will feed those people. And the type of food system we have right now is not going to work. You know, it's not sustainable. It's actually, we're talking about climate change. A big part of it is caused by this food system. You know, so by reducing our meat consumption, by taking actions like consuming grains that are drought resistant, searching some ingredients that are not grown in the type of agriculture that big agri has imposed upon us, the type of monoculture. That's what we need to get away from. We need to get back to that rotational type of agriculture, which is the traditional way. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We don't need, it was already there. We knew that our ancestors have passed it on upon us. You know, we don't try to, when we got Elly to the sourcing of the ingredients to the farmers, we don't try to tell them how to do it. They know how to do it. We just want to support them. We just want to support them, help them, equip them, you know, help them with better agricultural practices, just to open markets for them. This is all we need to do. And the rest is just, is there. You know, you can enjoy a simple meal. If it's sourced properly, the products are good quality, it's going to nourish you. It's going to nourish you. A simple bowl of brown rice with tamari sauce and scallions is like the best thing. I love it.
That's our big takeaway.
Well, just make it forno.
In
Risponio, there we go.
There we go. It's even faster cooking.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah.
Well, I think, you know, somewhat related, switching gears, but in terms of just, you know, opening new markets and what maybe it has allowed that, I'm really curious for you all how much social media has altered and sort of transformed your own careers or your life in food, and then more specifically, what it's done for the culinary community throughout COVID. Amy, I'd love to hear from you, both in your own, you know, use of social media and just what you've seen it do for other chefs this year.
Oh yeah, I think it's well, I guess everyone's online more. Is that why? People have, like, you know, spending more time. I guess it was a way to connect, I think, and just see what people were doing with the trying to feed everybody and trying to, you know, create in the kitchen. And yeah, I mean, I think for me personally, I just like recording what I do. And so taking photographs is sort of a fun, creative part of making food. But you know, I feel like it's a time suck too. So I don't know, you've got to find a balance, don't you? But it's been a great way to connect with people and answer a lot of questions and get, you know, like especially doing Instagram lives or videos, people are really grateful to be able to show them through something, because maybe my recipes are a little intimidating for some people, as simple as I try to make them. They're different, you know, using different ingredients that they may not have had before. So that's been the best part, I think, about the social media sort of boom in the last year. It was really like being able to connect with people, and then people going, oh, now I make them every week, and you know, that's what I want. So
that's great. Michel, for whether you or other, you know, chefs or people maybe who, you know, were working in restaurants and kitchens and didn't have much social media before this year, and they've used it. Any interesting takeaways? And
I'm like the classic case study. I was, full transparency, I'm 62 years old. So, it's my teenagers when they were teenagers, they're in their 30s now, taught me how to use this thing. And I still look at it as something that you use to accept calls and answer emails. So I, basically, what happened with me is I was noticing, I'm very fortunate to be friends with a French chef, Jacques Pepin, who lives here in Connecticut with us. And my wife, Laura, and I were visiting him. We brought him dinner one night. And I was just commenting on how his social media following exploded, because he used to do all cooking demos and all of his technique stuff just on the road. And he ended up just cooking every day at home. So they just set up some cameras in his kitchen and he cooks every day at home. And he looked at me and said, you know, you need to get off the dime, buddy. People are desperate for solutions. They're stuck at home. They have limited resources. And you have a way of showing people things and explaining things that's easy to understand. When are you going to step up to the plate? So I just recently actually started engaging more through social media. And now I'm kind of addicted to it, because you create real dialogues and real conversation strings with people that you don't even know, but you can tell that they have a genuine interest and a genuine passion for the food. They're curious, they're inquisitive, they're looking for solutions. And it's a great direct way to engage. And frankly, it fills a huge void that's left by food television, which really literally has turned food into a prop. It's really like entertainment TV. I'm so annoyed by it, right? But the interesting thing about doing simple tips, simple recipes, to Amy's point, doing Instagram lives where you can actually show what you're doing and tell them what you're thinking while you're doing it, and you just see the appreciation and sense it. So I mean, obviously at Wholesome Crave, because I have so many chef friends, and it's such a cause to support the work of Wholesome Wave, where we're now tapping into chef friends of mine who are very eager and actively engaging with us now to support us through like social media campaigns and stuff like that. And what we're finding is that it really helps build and validate your product. So it's just a great way to connect directly with the consumer, cut out the marketing agencies, cut out so many of the middlemen, and have direct, genuine conversations with folks who are interested in what you're doing and you're interested in what they're doing. I found it, I used to be annoyed by it. Now I find it it's a pretty awesome thing.
Well, that's cool. That's a good takeaway. Pierre, how about you, or for anyone in your circle, chef-wise and culinarily?
Oh, for me, it's been the same thing. I mean, I was a bit like Michel, not really too deep into social media, and then COVID hit, and so we hired at Yolele, we hired this wonderful marketing director, Gemma, her name, and she really is the one who pushed me into getting more into this IG thing, and that really works, that works, and I find myself doing IG lives on a weekly basis, or just having people just requesting for you to do cooking demos and for private events or whatever. But that's just something that really opened up the world, beyond the four walls of the restaurant. Now, I find, in the audience when I do IG lives, I can see people from Europe, from Africa. It's like, wow, that's fantastic. But you interact with them, they ask you questions, very good questions that you can give them direct answers. There's like Michel said, there's a thirst for that knowledge. They want to know it, and we have our responsibilities to share it with them, and that would just make it a better. I mean, that makes them better cooks. That allows us to overall a better society. When there's more better cooks in the society, I mean, there's, I guess, less people suffering from having no choice and eating so-called food that's going to get them sick. The type of food that what they say at the FAO that has no culinary use. I mean, those that shouldn't be called food if it has no culinary use. I mean, that's just mind-boggling. So IG live or social media just really is a great way to network and to spread the message.
That's very cool. I love that you guys are really leaning into it. So last questions for me before we go into some of these that I'm seeing come in through the chat, and these are just sort of fun ones because I know that all of you are avid gardeners. So I'm curious two things. We heard a little bit from Michel earlier, but you can tell us what you're planting right now, are excited about growing this spring and summer, and if there are any new ingredients or sort of kitchen hacks that you've discovered this year, because as you said, we're all tired of cooking. So I'm just curious about the garden and your kitchen and anything that you'd want to share. Actually, Pierre, we'll go back to you.
Okay, my garden. I really started gardening last year when I moved to the Bay Area, and I saw that I had this beautiful garden and backyard. So I'm growing this year. I'm getting even bolder, and I'm growing some heirloom tomatoes. I'm growing some beans, pole beans, cantaloupes. I have two different types of cantaloupes that are growing. I have these beautiful, it's starting to come, it's promising, beautiful French radishes, French breakfast radishes that looks like it's going to be beautiful. The leaves are already out. I have Lakota squash. I have basil. I have a lemon tree that came with the house, so I have nothing to do with it, but I pruned it and it's giving me some beautiful lemon. I have an olive tree as well. And I have lavender, which is really beautiful right now. Rosemary, basil, habanero. I studied habanero now too. Last year I had Chinese celery, and it's still like, and it never died. I mean, it's still very lush, and it's really great right now. I have scallions and arugula as well.
Okay.
And
Wow.
I may miss a couple. Yeah, it's been it's ambitious. I'm going bold.
Extensive. No, that's great. And anything you've discovered in the kitchen or a new ingredient you're loving?
Well, it's not a new ingredient. I've just, I've been sourcing those ingredients and bringing them. So I'm doing a lot of testing. And this ingredient, dawa dawa, I mentioned it earlier. It's this fermented locust bean. I'm so excited to have it in my kitchen. I was able to source it, and this is a seed from a fruit that grows in dry areas. And that fruit, once we use it, once we eat it, we keep the seed and we ferment it. Because in African cooking, nothing is wasted. Even the seeds, we figure out a way to to turn it into food. And that seed has a pungent smell when it's fermented, but it brings such an amazing flavor to your sauces. And now what we did for at Yolele, we dehydrate it so we can bring it to the market here. We dehydrate it and just it's a powder now. And I just dust it to finish I could finish my salad with it, or I just can rehydrate it and put it into a sauce or a soup. And it's really amazing. I'm really excited because that's the thing we used to have before bouillon cubes came, and bouillon cubes came and took over, unfortunately, in a way that's so pathetic in Africa. It's like everyone uses bouillon cubes. I've seen people even crushing directly bouillon cubes over their plate. So that's really the thing that we used to have, and I'm trying to bring it back. I'm very excited about it. It's really beautiful, and it brings amazing umami to your dishes.
Amazing. I love that. Amy, how about you?
And you can get it at yolele.com soon. So
Okay, so it has an umami flavor.
it does have, oh yes, amazing umami flavor and slightly chocolatey too. It's really exciting. It's really exciting.
Sounds delicious. Yeah. So I'm in a much colder climate up here. And I'm looking at like oregano that survived like 5 blizzards. So that just like came out, and I was like, wow, I don't have to buy that again. So I'm happy about that. And I'm just expanding the like 2 garden beds that we just kind of quickly assembled last year, and thought I won't even be here to pick it. I thought I was just having a break, like we all thought. So now we're getting a bit more serious and planted all the seeds. They're inside right now, and there's just like radishes and a lot of radishes, a lot of greens. I mean, stuff that like I love growing arugula because it's just so easy and hearty. But as I said, a lot gets ripped out prematurely by my son. So, we'll just see. I've joined a CSA. Don't worry, I'm not trying to grow everything from a farm up the road. So, and then I love going to the farmer's market. So even though I grew up with a very serious garden, I don't expect to be producing everything. But tomatoes went really well. So last year, so yeah.
And you might have shared earlier one of your new ingredients, but anything that you're really loving right now?
Well, I was trying to think of it because I'm actually just geared towards Ezra, my son's diet. So it's like, trying to make, get greens into his diet a little bit, and, I don't know. But I did buy a dehydrator. I never owned one. All my years as a chef, I've never owned one. And I started dehydrating steamed winter squash last year and ground it up, and I can't believe the flavor. I mean, I'm not sure really what to do with it, but I just started experimenting, and like, all the pears and apples from the fall last year. And I've been making things like kale chips, which are so dated. And so like people at the health food store said, what, kale chips? I haven't heard about them for 10 years. And I was like, yeah, I know, I'm finally into them because it's one great way that he'll eat greens. And I started mixing miso and vinegars and oil and a little bit of cashew butter and just different flavors, and very lightly tossing it, and then made the kale chip, and it's going down very well. So that's my latest, like, I feel like it's a real accomplishment, even though raw food chefs have been doing this forever. I'm like, yay, kale chips.
I love it. Michel, how about you?
Yeah, well, it's awesome because we're in our 20th year for the garden. We were really fortunate. A couple of seasons, our garden was the feature garden in the PBS show, The Victory Garden. So we have the chives that we have now are just reestablished every year from the same place we planted them 20 years ago. Same thing with sunchokes. We have some things that just naturally proliferate here, wild mustards and things like that. But the whole garden kind of looks like the ingredients. If we took like all 8 of our Wholesome Crave soups and took the ingredients, most of it's growing in my garden, which I think is kind of cool. Yeah, because it really does highlight for us, especially when we looked at the pandemic. Cooking at home became really big. But one of the things that I didn't see covered as much on the news, but I read it in a lot of articles, was the number of people who started growing their own food. And a lot of it was almost like that kind of defense mechanism. Wow, how long is this thing going to last? And the interesting thing is that once people start growing their own food, they actually learn how challenging it is to farm. But when you get it down, it's pretty astonishing. So we change the varieties up as often as we can. We've learned from the pitfalls of planting in the same place year in and year out. Luckily, we run about a dozen chickens on average, and we have plenty of material to really nutrify the composting that we do. But we're really blessed. So my wife, as I was saying at the beginning, just loves finding all kinds of wacky. She tries to challenge me by finding seeds of vegetables I've never heard of. And she succeeded with like 9 or 10 varieties this year. So I'm really looking forward to those happening. When it comes to the kitchen hack, the one thing that I never really tried, but I was spending so much time in the kitchen because Jacques yelled at me and told me to start doing my own videos that I had remembered encountering this like really kind of super crispy taco with like melted caramelized cheese coming off of the end of the blue corn tortilla shell at this place called Madre Boutique Taqueria in Boise, Idaho. I forget the chef's name. I feel, it's early Alzheimer's, but he's a transplant from LA. So I just kind of discovered my way into it. I learned that if you take a cast iron skillet and you sprinkle grated cheese on it first, and the skillet is hot, and you put your, pre-seared tortilla down on top of it, and then you cook your tortilla that way, the cheese glues itself into the tortilla, becomes super freaking crisp. And then you put the cheese on the inside. We do a little, obviously, Wholesome Crave fiery veggie chili, some fresh cilantro and stuff like that. It makes the crispiest freaking taco or quesadilla. It's like one of my most viewed videos on Instagram. People are like, that's how you get it crisp. So that's my hack, man.
I love that. I will be using
it. Works.
Very, very cool. Well, so we'll do two attendee questions since we're running a little close to time. But I'll maybe give these to each of you individually. One coming in is that there seems to be an inherent tension between convenience, accessibility, price, and health sustainability. A lot of what we've been talking about. And unfortunately, there's often a trade-off between these characteristics in food. So how do you as chefs think about prioritizing among these things as you create foods yourself? And I'd actually be curious to hear from you, Michel, if is there a hierarchy of trade-offs that you think about?
Well, yeah, I think it's another reason why we picked soup, because in any commercial kitchen, soup it's just a solution to odds and ends, but it also can become the base of other things, because you have soup and then you have leftover soup, and you can actually turn that soup into something else. You think of it like a mother sauce. So when I look at, we have eight different products. All of them are 100% vegetables and grains. You can make a soup by thickening water with a slurry, whether it's cornstarch or whatever it is, and add like powdered tomato or concentrate to it and have a tomato soup that way. Or you can just cook a shit ton of tomatoes and with some basil and some olive oil and some salt and pepper and puree them and have a really good soup. So what we've been doing is intentionally going the soup route and then sharing with people. We can actually do it now more that we're e-commerce, because on the website we can offer people recipes about how the soups can become bases and sauces. Like chili is a great filling for a quesadilla, so that people can buy something that's as though they made it themselves because it only has vegetables in it. And they can use it for, they can either heat it up or they can use it for other things. So we designed it that way because we thought it was a really great solution for scaled food service, where folks are always looking for shortcuts, but most of the supply chain solutions for shortcuts are powdered hollandaise, highly processed things, with that ingredient panel where you can't understand anything on the back. So that, we started the company with the intention of being whole meal solutions, but also something that if you just opened it up and heated it up, you'd be proud to say, this is as good as something I could cook myself. So it's just the intentionality of design. It's like, Pierre's intentionality in first teaching people out of his passion for his native cooking, but then realizing he had to create a supply chain if people were going to cook. What good is a cookbook if someone can't get the ingredients? You look at the way Amy's approaches to kind of teaching and informing people about how food can be a solution in their own life. I think the one thing that the three of us align on is this intentionality that we'd love for people to be able to cook from scratch, but we also have tips and hacks and things that we can share that are solutions for them, so they can find it easier to make good food part of their everyday life.
Yeah, that's great. This is a quick one for Pierre, but an important one. Where can we find Yolele? Website of Yolele.com.
Well, you have yolele.com for sure. That's the first place I would recommend highly. Of course, you have Amazon. That's the last place. But in addition to yolele.com, I mean, Whole Foods been great, and all the Whole Foods mostly, more than likely, will carry our products, or one of our products, or if not all of our products. You have natural supermarkets. If you live in New York City, Thiam, Sahadi, I mean, you name them, but many of them, we close to a couple thousand supermarkets now that are distributing it. We also are in a Fresh Direct, Thrive Market, so it's out there. But if you go on our website, yolele.com, you can also find places that are near you to get it.
Perfect. Okay. And last question for Amy is, where do you live, and how does it affect your ability to grow, cook, and prepare meals throughout the year? How does it sort of affect your preparation?
Yeah, I'm in upstate New York, and I want to say that you can get your Fornio, Pierre, at a farm store called Hawthorne Valley Farm Store. They have a stall at the Union Square Farmers Market. And someone bought it for me last year and bought it up, and it was the first time I tried it. Anyway, so if you're upstate, then you can get it there. It's a great.
There you go.
It's like a good little health food store. I'm all about the co-ops and small ones. But so living up here, I mean, it's a little bit slower than being in New York City. I mean, I really miss, the farmers market in New York was the way I connected to nature, living in the middle of Manhattan all these years. And I feel like I'm so grateful, because I just really understood micro seasons, and like when the Rams came in and the fiddlehead ferns and all of that. And now up here, I'm actually picking them, and we went ramp picking on the weekend. So it's really exciting to be able to forage food. I mean, that's like a whole other thing. But there's a long winter and you're relying on food from other places. So it's great if you're so grateful for anything that you did, preserve or ferment yourself or dehydrate, like I did last year. But yeah, it's just a little slower than New York. That's what I'm noticing. Like, I've been asked to make a video for some spring recipes, and I'm like, there is moldy strawberries up here that you really don't want to be eating. So I'm not going to make that, So yeah, it's slower, but I'm okay with that. It's a shorter season. I mean, the farmers market ends at the end of October. So you really notice like how spoiled you are in the city. Yeah. just with that connection to all these farms. But then up here, I've gotten to know incredible small farmers, and there's a little co-op in the town of Chatham where I am, and they have local little microgreens all year from a farmer just down the road. So there's gems to be found. But if you're shopping in a supermarket anywhere in the country, you're starved for inspiration because everything's packaged and shipped from God knows where, and monoculture, and it's like it's just mass produced vegetables, so I feel like that's when I was, anyway, I don't want to go on, but it's really hard to find inspiration in that situation. And as a chef, when I was cooking privately for people and I'd be like stuck somewhere and had to go, I'd be like, oh my God, how, and you racking your brain, like, what can I do? Whereas if you're at a farmer's market or growing your own food or buying it from a farm, it just speaks to you. You don't have to think about, like, the ramps. I don't even care. I don't need to do anything fancy with them. They're just going sauteed. That's it. Like, there's no need to even pickle. I mean, I can't even bother doing that. It's just like, they are fresh, live food. Like, just eat it,
Yeah. That's a very good ending statement. I love that. Well, thank you all so much. This has been such an interesting conversation. Thank you everyone who's on and who listened. And please remember to support Wellness in the Schools. Check out their great work. And really thank you guys so much for joining tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us. Great to meet you all.
Good night.